101.95. I'm your host, Doug Sparks, editor-in-chief of Merrimack Valley Magazine. Lou, how are you doing this week?
Good. The gremlins in the machine today.
Gremlins in the machine?
Gremlins in the machine.
What does that mean?
There's just a lot of technical stuff going on.
You can't just throw water at the machine and fix it, right? That's how they deal with the... Isn't that how they get rid of the gremlins? They throw the water on them?
Oh, I don't know.
It's been a while. My gremlinology
Holy water? Or... Oh, you mean Gremlins like the movie?
Yeah.
I get...
I lost respect. You know the band Slayer, the heavy metal band Slayer?
Yes.
I remember, there's a mystique. Like, obviously, those guys just sleep upside down and live off in castles somewhere. But then I knew somebody who knew them, and he said they were like, being on the tour bus, it was like they weren't in a metal band, and they would just watch like Gremlins 2 on the like they were just completely
They're just
like
people,
normal guys,
right?
Yeah, you would like to think that people in that world are who they say they are, but maybe if they were like true sociopaths, it wouldn't be such.
I was explaining to somebody that Rob Zombie was from Haverhill the other day, and so I'm looking up pictures on the internet, and you get the Rob Zombie pictures, but if you scroll down enough, you get Rob Zombie out of character.
Yeah,
and it's like, all right, just a guy.
Yeah, the guy who goes to Trader Joe's.
Yeah, exactly.
And admires the selection of nuts.
Yeah,
right.
I could walk into him on the street in Washington Square, and I'd never even know.
Sure. So our guest, let's dive right in. Our guest has a lot to say, I'm sure. Scott Plath, he's a writer, restaurateur. He's the owner of the Stones Hospitality Group. Scott, before I ask you how you're doing and what's going on, because I know there's a lot, I have a question about the turkey. Because as I told you, our family ordered the Thanksgiving, your Thanksgiving offering at Cobblestones. We went and picked it up. I love cooking, but we wanted to support a local business, so we ordered from you guys. And I don't know what you guys do with that. Do you inject that with bacon fat? What's going on with that turkey? Because turkey is not my favorite dish in the world, but we could not stop eating it. And my kids, who are young and picky. There was not a crumb. I'm not kidding. This is not a metaphor. There was not a crumb left. What's going on with that turkey? What do you guys do over there?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Chef Adam brined the turkey this year. He's a big fan of brining, and he's a master.
It wasn't just a regular brine. There was something going on with that. It just disappeared. I've never enjoyed turkey as much as I did this year. Thanks to you guys. As I was sitting there waiting for my order. I haven't told you this. I got there a little bit early. There were a few people who were kind of sitting around waiting early. I brought a book, as I always do. I'm a literary guy. I like to read. And like the last woman who came in through the door, the last of that little group, it was supposed to be from 3 to 4 people would show up, walks through the door, starts complaining about the parking, complaining about this, complaining about that. And then she went and started complaining to your staff, saying she was the first person there and hadn't been served yet. And I felt so bad for the people there. They were courteous. They dealt with her. Yeah, ma'am, no problem. And eventually she left satisfied. But she walked in, and I was just like, man, in this business, you must deal with the biggest problems, because it was just, and nobody said anything. Everyone's like, it's the holidays, and we all kind of looked at each other. We knew, like, oh my goodness, like these poor people having to tolerate that. Do you ever lose your temper? Do you ever get to that point where it's like you just want to grab somebody by the scuff of the neck and kick them out the door?
Well, the amount of times I've reached that point when I wanted to is plenty. The times I've actually lost it are fortunately few and far between. But yeah, every once in a while, it can be trying. People are demanding and can be in a bad mood, and our business has long been a place where where folks feel like they can sort of take out their aggravation. But we're trained professionals. It goes with the territory, and I think if we do our job and we have the right people, we look at those situations as a challenge.
Sure.
How do we talk them off the ledge?
Yeah. Well, everybody did talk her off the ledge. They were very delicate with her, and they handled it, and it was just. But it saddened me. It saddened me to see.
Yeah. It stinks. I remember one time, many years ago, a woman was, her reservation wasn't ready. And we were literally 5 minutes past her reservation, and I was in the kitchen directing tickets and on a sold out night, and they came and got me in the kitchen and said, there's a woman at the front desk who demands to speak with the owner. I'm like, we are in the middle of getting whaled here. I'm like, I can't do that. They're like, you need to go talk to this lady. She's horrible. So I threw a blazer over the T-shirt that I was wearing because the kitchen is hot, and I went out there to address her, and she just there was nothing we were going to say that was going to calm this lady down. There was no chance she was going to have a pleasant experience with us that night. And I basically, after she said the things she needed to say, I looked at her, I said, can I give you a recommendation for another restaurant? Because we're not going to be able to make you happy tonight. So let's forget about that reservation and send you elsewhere. And she was appalled. She couldn't believe that we went there. And her husband looked like he was scared because I think he's been in this situation before. And after she left, after they left, I turned to the staff and I'm like, only I can talk to a customer that way. Like it's the owner's option, but you can't talk to guests that way because there was no way we were going to win that night.
Sure. So the crazy times. I mean, I think people now are more optimistic as far as the general future of dealing with COVID and the vaccines are starting to roll out. So this is kind of feeling like the end is in sight. But you're in a different position. You're seeing it in a different way. What's going on in your world right now?
Well, you know what? We are in crisis mode for sure. We have been for many, many months, but by the virtue of the original PPP money, we were able to afford labor and keep a good portion of our staff working. And when I say good portion, somewhere shy of 50%. We laid off all 3 restaurants worth of employees, in March, and then brought back who we could at first for a to-go business, takeout, and then we started morphing back into smaller menus, smaller staff, and changed the operational model a tad to be able to perform with less. Less is more, I guess, has been our strategy. But the PPP ran out a couple months ago, and sales are going in the wrong direction because of fear and the numbers going up and so on and so forth. So we're just hanging on in all 3 of our restaurants right now, and we're balancing COVID with sales, our survival, with the health of our staff. It's every single day is somewhat joyless to a certain degree, and I say that on the heels of our last conversation. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how really, really proud that I am that our people are able to go to work each day and show up knowing what they're facing and the stress that's out there and the challenges and their earnings reduced and their team reduced and so on and so forth, but still showing up for work every day and doing a great job on behalf of our guests.
For people who don't know, you opened up a restaurant this year in Nashua.
Yep.
What's going on in Nashua?
Well, Nashua was really modeled to be our concept of the future. We were responding to market forces and industry changes. Our first 2 restaurants are 27 and 12 years old, and the industry has changed quite a bit. So we came up with a new, younger, hipper, quicker, more casual model for the future a year ago. We've been working on it for some time, and we signed the contract, and then COVID hit. So we had no choice but to go forward. We delayed a couple of months and opened in June, and we're thrilled with the concept. It's a great environment. It's a lot of fun, and the staff is doing a great job, and the feedback has been great. But we're at 50% capacity in New Hampshire. We're in Nashua, and even when we can be at 50%, we aren't always because of demand. Demand out there is hurting for restaurants everywhere. We no longer have outside dining as an option, so we're struggling through up there as well, and trying to see this through to the other side. The good news at Nashua, it's a small nut. It's a fraction of the size of our other 2 really huge restaurants. It's only 1,850 square feet. It seats about 70 or 80 people. So it's much easier to manage down than the other ones, which are monsters.
Yeah, I'm just curious. beyond what's going on with Stone's Hospitality, are you seeing anything interesting or unusual or unexpected on the supply side? Like I'm practically a carnivore. I love to eat steak, and the price of steak is just like I don't know what's going on. Are you seeing these unusual fluctuations because of what's happening economically? Is there anything that strikes you as particularly strange or unexpected?
You know what? I think that it's been a really, really dynamic market for months now, for any number of reasons. I think the greatest influencer is demand. Our supply chain is affected as we are. So the growers, and the ranchers, and everybody is affected, and everybody is trying to figure out how to adjust inventories. Just like we. We don't want to run out of food because that stinks. But at the same time, we go days where we only serve a few customers, and we can't have food sitting on the shelves. So I think that a lot of what we see has to do with that. Availability and subbing out products for other products because you can't get what you normally could have gotten. It's sometimes we have to order things days in advance. In the beginning, it was keg beer. All of the beer makers ramped down their distribution. I mean, their production because draft beer was sitting on the shelves, and it has a shelf life. So we couldn't get draft beer for a while. Different brands, and steak certainly has been one of the most volatile markets. Beef.
Yeah. If you could sit down with Governor Baker and some of the politicians, what would you say to them?
Oh man, you know what? I don't know. I think the biggest frustration for me, and there's a huge push out there in my industry, driven by some Boston-based restaurateurs. Where's the plan? You can look that up, and it's it's like we have become sort of scapegoats for this thing. And I think largely unfairly, we contact trace. So it's easy to track a case of COVID back to a restaurant because we're the only ones contact tracing. But nope, they're not contact tracing at Walmart. You don't go to Walmart and or the supermarket and say that you're there. So it's easy to say, well, cases point back to restaurants. I'm like, that's because we're writing the names down because we're following the protocol and trying to be safer than everybody else. And meanwhile, we're getting kicked in the ass for it. And meanwhile, our hours are being cut. All these ridiculous. Listen, I wouldn't want to be the governor. And I'm not trying to say that Governor Baker has an easy job. I know he doesn't, but to cut numbers down from table sizes and hours down from 10 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. or 11 p.m. to 10 p.m. And just continually to chip away at the small revenue stream that we have with no support. We cracked up, and I say that sarcastically, when they granted us expanded outdoor dining into the end of December. Like they were doing us some big favor, like folks sit out. It was so tone deaf to what we're going through. It's like folks are going to sit outside in December and dine and have a bottle of wine. The whole thing is ridiculous. And there's no help. There's no assistance. There's no money. So shut your buildings down, cut your parties down, cut your capacity down, cut your hours down. And, oh, by the way, we've got nothing for you. It's the whole thing is awful.
I wanted to ask you about the role of social media and all this. I have ambivalent feelings about Facebook and social media, and there's some great stuff about it, including following you. I really enjoy your posts, and you're really opinionated. Surprise, surprise. And I also just like, the food porn. I like it when you put the lobster bisque up, and it makes me hungry, and it makes me want to have lobster bisque. And it's just fun to know what you guys are up to. And there's also something a little bit poetic about it. Like you'll be writing about like being there on a snow day, and you say, hey, everybody come down. We're still open even though it's snowing outside. And you get this kind of like nice, warm, fuzzy feeling thinking about what it might be like inside Cobblestones, knocking back a few cocktails, hanging out with you. At the same time, social media, you talk about these fears that people have. Social media is also I'm sure as much as it's used to spread, knowledge that people need, it's also kind of getting people worked up and upset about these sort of things. So I'm wondering what you think about social media. You obviously use it. You obviously like it because you're on there.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on how social media has played into this whole pandemic and the response?
It's interesting. I guess social media is a double-edged sword, right? There are times I just have to get off it because it's so depressing. The negativity, as you were talking about that customer who walks in the door and is doing nothing but complaining. There's a whole lot of that on social media. I look at it as an opportunity to spread a little bit of good news. I think that for me, it's an extension of my personality and the personnel and and our mission. Our restaurants are no different today than they were 6 months or a year ago with regard to our mission. Our mission is to make people feel comfortable and cared for. We're the hospitality business. People use us way more than for food and beverage, but we're an escape. We're a respite. People come out of a hard day's work, or a Friday night after a long week's work to come have a couple of drinks and have somebody else prepare their food for them and take care of them and thank them and smile at them and tell them that everything is going to be all right. And that's what we do for a living. So social media is, I guess, a way for me to extend that perspective, to more people, in a number of different ways. And hopefully to influence them to come join us at the restaurants. And we are still doing that, obviously, in much smaller numbers. But, we keep people separate. We have huge spaces in our first two restaurants. People can sit in a group of 6 or 8 or whatever the number is these days and be way far away from others and just hang out and have a few cocktails and, enjoy the end of a rough week. I don't know if there is a week anymore. I don't know. Is there such thing as a hard work week these days? I actually don't even know.
Not for us. It depends. People have had different experiences. Hey, you're not a doctor, so I'm not expecting you to to speak from the position of a doctor. But what do you say to people who are a little bit afraid to go out? What do you tell them? How do you say, hey, this is what we're doing, and maybe these fears are unfounded?
I tread very lightly with giving advice to anybody, especially with regard to this. I just got off the phone with one of my managers who's kind of terrified, and she's a trooper and she's been doing her job. Where I have another manager who is not terrified because people are different. And people respond differently to stressors and and perceived danger or real danger. And I know there's real danger here, and I'm not going to be the guy saying that this is a farce. It certainly is not. But there are plenty of people out there who are also taking the attitude that I'm going to risk getting COVID, and if I get COVID, I'm going to survive it, and then I'm going to move on in life, and I'll have had it. I think that there's a whole lot of fear, and again, I get it. There are people dying and there are people sick, and I don't discount that. But personally, I travel from restaurant to restaurant and guest to guest, and not without cause. Not without caution and concern. When we ask everybody to do everything that they're asked to be safe and to wear the mask and to sanitize and to keep distance because all the science makes sense. But at the same time, I don't know how long can I stay cooped up and locked in my apartment and not go through life. So I don't know. It's different for everybody. And I think we see the worst on the news and anybody, every time it snows, now it's a nor'easter. That would be my only point. Like every time it snows, it's a state of emergency and it's a nor'easter. When I was growing up, it was going to snow.
Yeah.
Then somebody coined that phrase nor'easter, and it made a great graphic sweeping across the screen. And now news is entertainment, and they want to keep you glued to the TV set. And what keeps people glued is really, really bad news and danger. So without discounting the true danger of COVID, I think for those people who want to be scared, just watch the news. I guess that's all I have.
Yeah. Do you have any inside knowledge or any thoughts, or do you catch the vibe on what's going on with the vaccine and when people who work in the restaurant industry are going to be eligible for that? Because I know it's going to be frontline workers to begin with, but where do restaurants fall into this? Do you have any sense of when you might be getting the vaccine?
No, I haven't heard anything about restaurant folks being moved to the front of any lines. I couldn't tell you, Doug. I know they're talking about healthcare workers and folks in assisted living. And after that, that's all I know. I think we're at this point a wait and see.
Yeah. I read an article online that said if this isn't handled properly, this COVID response, it's going to be the death of the independent restaurant as we know it.
Yeah.
Because it's only going to be the Applebee's and the big corporations who can kind of handle this. Are you worried about that?
Sure. I mean, we're there now. We're there now. I've had multiple friends close their restaurants for good, and others who have hibernated. Every week we hear of more restaurants closing their doors. Every single week we have a conversation about whether we should or shouldn't. We really are waiting right now for more government relief. In absence of more stimulus money and more support, we'll shut our restaurants. We're only open now to keep people working. That's the only reason that our doors are open, is to keep our employees working. So because we can afford to do so, but just barely. We're losing money every week as an organization. But we're keeping folks putting paychecks in their pockets and being able to pay their rent and feed their families. But it's unsustainable, and I don't know when the light at the end of the tunnel. Where is it? They keep saying the numbers are going to get worse. So is that January? Are they going to get better in February? And outdoor dining isn't going to truly happen until March, April, May. When does the vaccine become widely available? And we can't, in our current state, we can't spend another 3 or 4 months losing money the way we are. We've taken out loans, to bridge us to this point here. But, I'm too old. I'm too old to keep incurring more debt,
Sure.
It wasn't part of the plan.
Absolutely. So 2 related questions before I open this up, and Lou is going to kind of jump in here. I'm sure he has some things to ask you. The first thing, let's go optimistic, and let's say, by the end of the spring, we enter the post-COVID age, the post-pandemic age. Do you have plans? Are you thinking about what's going to happen as soon as the sun comes out and everybody's out, skipping rope in the yard and the kids are throwing frisbees and the butterflies? Or like what's going to happen at the restaurants then if everything goes well?
Well, I think that anybody who's say that again?
Do you think about it? Do you have plans?
Sure. We think about it all the time.
Is it going to be the world's biggest party? Is that the way you envisage it? Is there going to be like, the best reggae band you've ever heard is going to be playing downtown Lowell next to Cobblestones, and it's going to be pretty amazing?
Yeah, actually, I've posted a couple of, the national park in Lowell has been a little bit of a ray of sunshine during this whole thing, because they keep posting concerts that they've booked for next summer. And you don't hear a lot of that going on these days. So every once in a while, we get I get an email announcement that we've booked another show at the boarding house park, which is right around the corner from Cobblestones. And I share that post and say, we're throwing a huge party that day. Before the show, after the show, it's going to be a huge party, because, good news is hard to come by right now, and so any ray of light is encouraging. But yeah, sure, we see lots of outdoor events and being able to get back to normal and celebrate what we have all gone through in the last year, and certainly have our fingers crossed that that's the way the vast majority of the public sees the future. Pent up demand.
Yeah.
And excited to get back out and do what we were doing prior to this whole freaking mess.
Sure. We are starting to get those press releases from the Lowell Summer Music Series, and we're putting them in the community calendar, and it feels good because for a while there has not been a lot going into that community calendar. Yeah. So if people go to mvmag.net, they can go and they can see some of the bands we're going to be playing next summer and fall. The related question is this. Obviously, you're not just working. Pre-pandemic, you like to travel and you like to go explore the world and you like to have adventures. Do you have personal plans for what you're going to be doing post-COVID?
Not yet. Not yet. But I can guarantee you it's something.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're itching to go.
Yeah. Yeah. There are people out there and they're already talking about it. They're talking about, I really want to do this. I want to do that. I want to go to the movies. And I'm maybe a little bit like you where I feel a little bit numb. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I don't know. Like, I just need to bring the trash out and not burn the dinner. And it's like everything's so immediate. But that is going to be something people are going to be thinking about because the end will be in sight at some point. And people are going to say, oh, man, where am I going to go travel? Am I going to do this? Am I going to do that? Am I going to go see a 3D movie, over at Lowe's? I go see a band at Cobblestones. Who knows? We'll be talking more and more about it.
My daughters, as a Christmas gift to Kathy and I, rented a farmhouse up in Vermont way for Christmas. An Airbnb for just a couple of nights over Christmas. I can't tell you how excited I am to get in the car and drive 2 hours north. Sure. And just get out of this environment and see new trees.
Yeah. My family did that not too long ago. We went to a yurt up in Maine, and it was it was in Acadia, and the area there, Bar Harbor, had completely shut down. Everybody had already gone home because it was starting to get cold. We kind of felt like we had Bar Harbor to ourselves. Everything was shut, so we couldn't get a cup of coffee. But man, was it nice. Was it nice to just see just the change of location and just kind of kick back and listen to some nice music, and it was pretty glorious. We needed that. Yeah.
This whole thing, I think, makes you kind of realize how good we had it. It's sobering, to say the least. But
yeah. Hey, when you go up Vermont way and you go to this Airbnb, who cooks? Do you cook?
You know what? No, almost never. My daughters.
Oh yeah.
My daughters all love to cook and love the meal plan and. Yeah, and it will be all of them. I'll chop something. I'll be a prep cook.
Yeah.
Or I'll drink the wine that I'm handed.
Good.
The girls will take charge for sure.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
I love it.
I want to talk to Scott because Scott's been resonating with me during this interview because I've been one of these people, and I'm not the most fervent guy in terms of fear of COVID. In fact, I think our response has been disproportional to a large degree. And people understand the threat of COVID, but they don't understand the threat to the local economy and what it has produced. And I think they were lulled into a false sense of security by the initial stimulus. I think they were lulled into a false sense of security by the stock market. I think they're lulled into a false sense of security by traveling on the streets now. Most of their old restaurants are still open to some degree. There are people on the streets. But we are not out in the woods in this on the economic side at all, are we, Scott? I mean, we're just we've been on a morphine drip to this point. The pain is about to be felt, isn't it?
Oh, I think for sure. I think we're in big trouble economically, and I'm a restaurant owner. That's all I really actually know. As such, my business is predicated upon both sides of the opinion and the argument in life, coming to my place as a respite to my places to eat and drink. So I have to really tread lightly in my opinions.
Sure.
We need both halves, blue and red. and concerned and conservative and bold and risk takers. We need them all to be whole.
And we need
So
the anti-COVID activists and the anti-COVID precautions and wariness, but we also need it for the economy as well. And I don't see that. I don't see
I
people paying
agree.
any attention to it.
I agree, and I agree with you. I think that the response has been disparate, and I think and I think it's a damn shame. I think people are being put out of business and destroyed. While and I don't think it had to be. And I don't have the answers. I really don't. I don't have the answers. I just think there are so many people. I was talking to somebody this morning who's very upset about because one of our employees was with somebody who had COVID, and I'm like, I understand the concern, but the person who has COVID is okay, and the person who was with the person who has COVID doesn't have COVID and tested negative. I'm like, so it's a false equivalency. Being with somebody who had COVID isn't having COVID, and having COVID doesn't necessarily, predetermine, disaster. I know quite a few people who have had COVID and have come through it just fine, and they were sick for a week and then they're not sick. And I don't mean for 1 second to disparage or minimize
No.
those cases where that is not true. But the numbers are the numbers.
Have I gleaned correctly from your answers today that the current regulations here in the state of Massachusetts for restaurants do not allow you to break even? Restaurants are not breaking even under these conditions.
Oh, not even close.
Yeah.
Not even close. No way.
And
No,
when I hear, and you guys, Doug talked about a nightmare scenario for me where we get to be a Florida where there are no individual restaurants anymore, there's just chains. That's a nightmare to me. I love individual restaurants and one-offs and things like that. When my restaurant, one of the ones that's close to me on Plum Island, just announces that they're going into hibernation for a couple months coming up, is that code, I mean, how desperate is it financially at this point if a restaurant tells you that they're going to hibernate for the next 2 or 3 months? You can't speak for them individually, I understand, but
yeah, right. Without looking at somebody's P&L and knowing all of the, having all of the information, I try to never really speculate. I think that hibernating is to stem the negative flow, the negative cash flow.
Yeah.
And so if you can afford to negotiate a deal with your landlord and your bank, and your people can afford to go back on unemployment, and there's always going to be carrying costs. We still have to keep the buildings warm, and the refrigerators working or the compressors shit the bed, and then when we reopen, which is what happened to us, we incur thousands of dollars worth of repair bills.
Yeah.
Who knew? That's what happened the first time we got shuttered by Baker back in March. But I don't think that hibernating is necessarily code. I think it means we can't lose any more money right now. It may mean we're not going to reopen because, again, what are the numbers going to look like in April? Who knows? And but it scares me. The whole thing scares me. And I think there's a whole lot of people out there in my business rethinking their careers and their futures and looking for something else to do because the writing is on the wall for this business. It already has been, by the way. Donald Trump was right when he said many months ago, and you don't hear me say that very often, by the way. But when he said that a lot of restaurants were already struggling, he wasn't lying. Restaurants struggle. It's tough to make a living in this business. It always has been, and it's only gotten harder and harder and harder. In January, minimum wage goes up again in Massachusetts. I'm not against higher wages for staff. I am not. But each year, the cost of running a restaurant gets more expensive between healthcare and taxes and legislation, regulation, and minimum wage. So we're purging right now. We're losing money. And yet this grand bargain that was made in Massachusetts a couple of years ago with annual increases for all workers, we have to adhere to that.
Right.
So we just have to lose more money, in January. I don't know. At what point in time do you just just draw the shades.
I'll tee this one up for you because I think you're on the edge, so I want to tee it up for you. You have restaurants in both New Hampshire and Massachusetts, so you're dealing with COVID response in both New Hampshire and Massachusetts for restaurants. Compare and contrast for me. What are your comments on looking at those two different approaches?
I've only been in New Hampshire for 6 months, 7 months or so, but I like it. And the city of Nashua has been really good to work with. They've been very pro-business and proactive. It's been a joy to be in Nashua. I think that the restrictiveness of Massachusetts and the burden of doing business in Massachusetts continues to chip away at our morale and our and our bottom line. I mean, they go hand in hand, I guess. But Massachusetts is burdensome, and then we're fighting that good fight all the time because the minimum wage being a great initiative, it's the paradigm that's broken. It's not. People should make more money, but this is the way the industry has been forever, with gratuities and so on and so forth. And this isn't the show to go into the depth of how our people get paid and how our industry needs to change. But when you put it on the burden of a small business owner, bad things happen, and that's what we're seeing now. And then in the middle of COVID. Yeah, I don't know. I think something like 25% of independent restaurants in Massachusetts have closed since March. If I'm not mistaken, that's the latest number.
It's going to get worse too.
It's going to get worse. It is.
So
People are just hanging on right now. Those who are still in business are clinging and hoping for more stimulus. I can tell you. We'll know within the next couple of weeks.
And speaking of the next couple of weeks, in January, the January issue is coming out. I don't want to get into the details because I want people to read it. It's a great column. We gave you a little bit more space than we normally do. You can check out Scott's column and find out how he earned the nickname Bullethead. And some of, you get the inside scoop and what's going on. And usually January is a shorter issue. This January, Merrimack Valley Magazine is packed. There's a lot of great stuff. So if you don't subscribe, go subscribe to the magazine or get ready to head over to Butcher Boy or Man Orchards and pick up a copy. There's a lot going on in this January issue. I don't even want to talk about it. Wait till you guys see, including the cover story. Does anybody know the cover story? Lou, do you know the cover story?
I do not know the cover story.
You know who Calvin Cater is?
I do not.
Calvin Cater is a UFC fighter who is about to face the number one contender for the featherweight title in January, mid-January.
I take it he's a Merrimack Valley boy?
Methuen.
Oh,
if
great.
he wins this fight, and I think he's got a very, very good shot, I think he's hungry for it, he could be the UFC featherweight champion, which means there's going to be a Methuen guy with that belt. He's very, very cool guy. There's a great story on him by Adam Tokarts, Andover writer. So look forward to that. Look forward to seeing Calvin Cater on the cover. And there's just a lot of stuff in January. Before we go, I have one more question for you. If people want to support your restaurants, what's good on the menu? Do you still have that lobster bisque? I keep thinking about that lobster bisque since you put up the pictures. What's good on the menu? What should we go, if we want to support, what we should go pick up at Moonstones or Cobblestones or Stone Social?
Well, it's all good, Doug, and I don't mean to be a cop out, but we modified all of our menus back in March and April as we planned to reopen for COVID so that all the food traveled well. We really focused more on comfort and some family style options because we learned during the Great Recession of 2008 that's what folks want in times like these. So the chefs worked really hard to create some really great items that are just as tasty if you bring them home. So, we have braised meats like short rib, and we do an incredible stir fry that you can pair with any number of things, whether it be vegetarian tofu and eggplant, or you want to go for the braised short rib or the fried shrimp. Lots of comfort items. The chicken marsala at Cobblestones remains our most popular dish. It's all good. It's all there online, and I appreciate the support and the shout out and anything that folks buy.
It's good. Sure. Hey, do you have oysters at Cobblestones?
We do oysters once a week at both Cobblestones and Moonstones on a featured night. I think Mondays and Tuesdays, and then we continue them while they last.
Yeah. I only asked because we did something on oysters earlier this year, right when the world was kind of falling apart, and we were so concerned.
Yeah.
And then, sure enough, I think for a time, oysters were kind of off the menu, right? Am I remember that correctly?
Oysters are funny because they've been a great draw for us for many, many, many years. But they're an interesting food item because they're really best, freshly shucked, with a cold glass of beer or a chilled martini, sitting at the bar during good times. I look at oysters as sort of like a celebratory food. One of those things that we do at our restaurants. Life is good. It's a life is good food. So people often ask us, can we get oysters to go? Like, we haven't figured out yet the proper way to shuck an oyster for somebody and send it on the road and have it be amazing when they open up the package at home. This has been a struggle across the board for us. Our food isn't, generally made for boxes. We're a little bit more celebratory. I don't want to say, fancy or fine dining, but it's not subs and pizza. So we've had to work really hard to modify our items for takeout, but oysters isn't it.
Well, you've answered my question. I know what I'm doing post-COVID. I'm going for oysters at Cobblestones.
There you go. I love that.
It sounds like I will look forward to that. Anyways, Scott, thanks so much for coming on the 495. I really, really appreciate it. Everybody go check out, Moonstones and Cobblestones and Stone Social in Nashua. Please support local restaurants. They need you, right?
We need you.
Absolutely.
Gift certificates is a great time of year to share us with others.
It makes a great gift. Put it in the stocking. Put them in the stocking. A stocking
That's
stuffer.
Right. Put them in the stocking.
Right.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it.
All right. So
thanks, Lou.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Scott, if you can hear me, you're all set. We're good.